you.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning and welcome to Adult Lyceum here at Cassadaga. We're happy that you're here with us today. Those who are here physically, those who are here virtually, and especially those who are here spiritually. We're happy to have everyone. So we've been talking about the Fox sisters, modern spiritualism. Where we left off last week is the Fox family had moved into a temporary home in Hydesville. We found that the wrappings that had started as soon as they moved in were being caused by a peddler that had been murdered a few years earlier and buried in the cellar. So that's where we left off. We found out that the peddler's name was Charles B. Rosna. He was murdered a few years earlier and buried in the cellar, and he wanted everyone to know he was still there. Did not want to be ignored. So let's talk about where everyone is at this point in time. We're talking 1848. The Fox family, Mr. and Mrs. Fox, had 6 children. Two of the two youngest were still at home, Catherine and Marguerite. The brother David was currently living in Arcadia, which is 3 miles outside of Hydesville. Leah was living in Rochester, which is about 31 miles away from Hydesville. So with all the commotion going on with the peddler and his wrappings, we found out that they started inviting in the neighbors. The neighbors wanted to be part of the spirit communication. They wanted to be able to communicate and touch in with their loved ones. And it got to be a little much for the Fox family. Having all that attention, having all that wrapping going on at all times. So they decided to move back over to Acadia into the house of their brother, David, or their son David, depending on which family member you're talking about. He had already started a family, and they decided to move in with him. The wrappings did not stop just because they had moved. So they thought, well, maybe if we separate the girls, let me get their picture up. Are you able to get it to go, or? Thank you. Just slow. We're going to bring up some pictures for you. Give us 1 second. Trying to be high tech. Go one more. All right. Thank you. So whenever we see the pictures of the Fox sisters, almost every photo they're in, from left to right, Leah, Catherine, Margarita, or Katie and Maggie. Anytime they're photoed, it's usually in that order. So with wrappings continuing and getting stronger, they decided, well, maybe it's because Catherine and Maggie are together. So they separated. And they sent Catherine over to stay with Leah. Well, it didn't stop. The wrapping still continued no matter where the girls were. There's even a story I read that when the girls and the family would go into town to do their grocery shopping or whatever, wherever the girls walked, the wrappings followed them in the building, on the sidewalk, whatever. So the persistency of Charles Rosner was certainly evident, that he wanted to be heard. He had a lot to say. So they split the girls up, thinking that was going to solve the wrappings. It did not. It didn't. They continued. The neighbors started to get more involved. And as you asked last time, did people get offended or were they upset with the wrappings of the spirit communication? Some started to. Some started to say, hey, it's a fraud. Hey, they're not legitimate. So one of the, I consider it cruel now, but one of the cruel things they would do is strip them down to just their undergarments. They would tie them to chairs to make sure they weren't manipulating anything, tie their feet to the chairs to make sure they weren't in any way being fraudulent. So it's kind of something that wouldn't go by today. But they were really, a group of people were dead set against spirit communication because I believe it just scared them. So with the home circles, they decided to start home circles with the sisters. And they were doing that in Leah's house over in Rochester. But it seems the more they communicated with Charles Rosner, the spirit, the murdered peddler, the more adamant he was to make his presence known. And what started happening is the neighbors started, demanding that, hey, this is a fraud. Hey, they're not real. Hey, this isn't really happening. And the Fox family became very intimidated and scared. So in Rochester, there was a couple, Isaiah and Amy Post. They were Hicksite, what they called Hicksite Quakers. Their belief is the Bible is second to the light within, which I always thought that was nice. The spirit or light within myself is more important than what the Bible was trying to preach. So they took the Post. The Post took the Fox family in, not into their house, but kind of like under their guidance, so they could watch over them and protect them. So during a seance, they decided to ask Spirit, okay, now that we're communicating, what do you need? What do you want? We could do this rapping all the time, but what's the goal? And remember, when they're doing the rappings, all the messages came through using the alphabet. So let me tell you what message the Spirit gave. Then in your mind, I want you to remember A, B, C, D, E. Then you start over A, B, C, D to spell out the message. Dear friends, you must proclaim these truths to the world. This is the dawning of a new era. You must not try to conceal it any longer. When you do your duty, God will protect you, and the good Spirit will watch over you. Again, remember, A, B, C. So these messages would take a while, but Spirit was saying, hey, now that I'm making myself known, now that you're communicating, let's go out more into the public because more people need to see this, more people need to hear about it. Okay, how do we do that? Well, through the Posts, helping them and their connections, they're able to go to, in Rochester, it was called Corinthian Hall. They do their first public demonstration. That demonstration was November 14th, 1851. So we're talking almost 2 years later from when the Hydesville rappings had originally started. It was decided, since Leah was the eldest that she would be kind of like the manager, or they called her the secretary. She would set up the bookings for the two younger sisters, and they would travel around. They'd travel in their neighborhoods, then they would start traveling to other states. And if you've been to our seances here at Cassadaga, the medium typically will bring in spirit and let you know what spirit's saying. But at this point, with the Fox sisters and the wrappings, that's all it was. Every demonstration they'd go to, they'd have to go through the alphabet and the wrappings to get messages. So most likely, people were there for a very long evening. People enjoyed it. They wanted more of it. Do I need to? You got that, Jamie? I don't think this is going to work. So they continued to do this. Well, while touring of that year, 1851, thank you, Margarita, thank you. Now she's on the left. Usually she's on the right. She met a gentleman by the name of Dr. Elijah Kane. Anyone familiar with that name? Other than Jamie? Who is it? Do you know? He was the Arctic explorer, very well-known explorer at that time. And him and Maggie hit it off. And we consider that back, dating at the time. But as you'll see the pattern, once one of the sisters started getting involved with a gentleman, he would always say, I want you to stop doing that. I love you, but stop doing that. I can't have you being associated with me and going out and doing these demonstrations. So she decided to take a back seat. But, when you have the publicity of the last 3 years of connecting with spirit, being part of the public, then someone asking you to step back, it's hard to do. They say she went into a depressed state. They also said, none of it's confirmed, she started drinking as an alcoholic. Having separated from the family as she did, she just never, again, had that momentum built up where she was a part of the family and part of that spirit, I don't know what to call it, just the spirit tour, the spirit wrappings. She just never was a part of it again. When Dr. Kane came back from his Arctic quest, they were planning on getting married. But his family said no. We can't have our family's name associated with your family name, basically. So she was devastated. He said, we'll talk. I'm paraphrasing, I wasn't there. We'll talk when I come back. I've got to go to another Arctic adventure. I've got to go travel the world. So he left again, Maggie. But at this time, while he was abroad, he died. Her one true love passed away. Of course, the family shut her out. Nothing of the estate because they weren't officially married. She did the ultimate no-no back then. And I say this in tongue-in-cheek. She left her religion and became a Catholic. That was the big no-no for the family because they were all Protestant. I get a kick out of that, being a Catholic that became a spiritualist. And then they were kind of a spiritualist becoming a Catholic. So she became the Catholic, and basically she would do readings occasionally. She wasn't a part of the tour with her two sisters anymore. She died March 8th, 1893 at the age of 59. fairly young for now standards. So if you look at some of her old photos, they'll have her listed as Maggie Fox Kane. So people actually thought her and Dr. Kane were married. I've not been able to find any proof of that, so we just have to assume they were not married. Katie, Catherine. Katie was like the golden child, of course, being the youngest. I'm the youngest. I'm the golden child. Anyone else youngest here? See, you're the golden child. You're the golden child. Golden child. So Leah and Catherine started touring not only the States, but they had also started touring Europe. She was invited to London and really had great success, both of them. She traveled in a lot of circles, wealthy people that she wasn't used to traveling in the United States. While in England, she met a gentleman by the name of Henry Jenkins, Jenkken, Jenkin. He was an attorney. As soon as they got married, what did he ask her? You need to quit this tour thing. You need to really cut back. They had 2 sons. I'm not sure if they were twins. I can't access records in England. That's an upgrade. But I know they had 2 sons, Ferdinand and Henry Jr. She did pretty successful with her rapping tour, her mediumship. She did a lot of tours abroad, and then once her husband passed away in 1881. And then she settled the estate and moved back to Rochester, where Leah was still located. She brought her 2 boys back and finished her life in the States. She died July 2nd, 1892, in Manhattan. She was 55 years of age, still very young. So Leah was the tour manager. She was married 3 different times. She was married to Bowman Fish in 1829, Calvin Brown, 1851, which she had a daughter, Elizabeth. She married Daniel Underhill in 1858. Mr. Underhill was very wealthy man, so she was fortunate enough to live the rest of her life, basically in the life of luxury. She died in 1890 at the age of 79. Big difference. Big difference. Now, the Underhill family. Jamie, do you know, are they related to the Underhills that were down here?
I'm not aware of that connection.
Okay. Because I know the Underhill family had the property down here. I didn't know if they were associated or not. So by 1893, all the Fox sisters had passed. 45 years after the Hydesville's wrappings. So let's go back to some of the questions you were asking last week. See, here we go.
There's a delay in the...
All right, there's the 3. All right, I got it. All right, so here's the Fox Cottage as it stood in Hydesville, New York. In 1916, the cottage was moved to Lilydale, New York. Let's get that picture for you. Nope. I know the high tech just doesn't work all the time. It happens. So 1916, the cottage was moved to Lilydale, New York. There it is. There's, as it was moved to Lilydale.
Sorry.
That's good. And then in 1955, the cottage burned down at Lilydale. The peddler. What's on the next one? Let's go to the next one first. Okay, so this is the Hydesville Memorial Park in Hydesville, New York, where the cottage used to stay. Used to be. If you go to the next one, you can see they put the plexiglass around, and that was for, because then you could see, you'll see on the next one, that's the inside. Obviously the cellar of the house, then the house was built above that. That picture shows the cellar had already caved in and sealed. But I just wanted to let you know the memorial is still there if you ever get up to Hydesville. So the peddler. In 1904, the cellar wall collapsed while some children were playing, and a skeleton was revealed. And the skeleton also had a peddler's backpack or peddler's tote with them, with his initials on it. So the peddler was finally discovered in the cellar after all those years. Can you go to the next one? We'll get all this figured out for next time. There you go. So I wanted to just touch base with the people who helped the Fox sisters along the way. As I mentioned, Isaac and Amy Post. These are on your sheets. They're called the Quick Sight Quakers. Next one. Horace Greenlee, American newspaper editor, was also there to help the Fox sisters, promoting them. Go back just a second. Of course, we could say he was sympathetic to the cause, but he also sold newspapers. Some of the things that he was publishing from the seances and the Fox sisters sold newspapers. Go ahead. Then over in England, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, spiritualist, also helped the Fox sisters. And his information's there also. Yes, sir.
So after they found the dead guy buried in the cellar, did the rapping stop?
No.
No?
No. It did not.
Worse?
Well, about that few years, 10 years after that, John, the house was moved. So did the wrappings follow the house? I don't know that answer. It's a very good answer. Very good question. I'll find out. Very good question. The question was, when the body was found, the skeleton was found, did the wrapping stop? No. They continued. Are there any other questions? So, this part of the series, we're going to close out the Fox family. I was telling Pastor Gates earlier, I've got a subscription to Ancestry.com, and I put in the Fox family. And I'm watching it build every day. And the dates are pretty much exact what we've been told over the years. But what I'm also finding interesting is David, the brother of Leah, Maggie, Catherine, moved out west, and there's built his family out, built everything about his family and his fortune out in Wyoming and Montana, and his family's still there today. It'd be interesting to find out if any of them are associated with spiritualism. But out of all the brothers, one brother and 5 sisters, his family was the one who prospered the most and is still active that I can find out. So the next part of the series, which will start next week, is where did spiritualism move as a philosophy? Because eventually it becomes a religion. So I want to fill in those gaps with you next time. But I just wanted to ask if there's any questions regarding the Fox family before we close out that portion of it. Yes, ma'am.
Were the parents both deceased when the 3 daughters died?
Yes. Let me... Yes, both the parents passed away. Let me find that date for you. I'll get it for you next week. Yes.
Did the twin boys get involved at all?
The only thing I have found so far regarding one of them was the information that was put into Morris Pratt, where it said, I'm assuming Ferdinand, I'm not sure if they were twins or if Ferdinand was the second child. They said he was a medium as a child, and that he supposedly was, as a child, writing Greek for whatever reason. So I'm still trying to find more information about the 2 boys. So yes, great question. At least one we know was mediumistic. The rest of we don't know yet, but I will continue to search for y'all. Any other questions regarding the Fox family? Any questions about spiritualism? Yes, ma'am.
Did they actually start using the word spiritualism at that time in history?
No, spiritualism had been used prior to that. I would love to say it's our word, but it's not. We'll take spiritualist. Any other questions? How are you doing, Dawn? How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Excellent.
How are you
Yeah, thank you. Doing good.
doing? So, where do you feel that the spiritualism arrived from? Who do
Good
you
question.
think-
Good
who do you
question.
think
Where did the word spiritualism arrive from?
Was derived from?
In my mind, I'm breaking down the word and trying to go backwards. I know a lot of the words, once they're broken down to Latin, I do have that written from last week. I didn't bring that with me today. Lewis, do you know how the word's broken down and what year they started using spiritualism?
Because I think spiritualism is actually used. It's called ancient spiritualism. We go back many years, and there's Taoism, there's Buddhism. So the isms are part of the religion. So we just do spirit in front of it. But I think it goes ancient. It goes way back
Yes.
back in time. So
Very, very interesting.
Because we talked about last week, why not call it spiritism? Because you're talking to spirit, but spiritism is a specific religious movement happening at the same time.
Pardon?
Foxism.
Yes, we could have called it Foxism. Thanks, Lewis.
Fox is this.
Foxist. So thank you. Their story's a big story because it started why we're here today. And next week I'll get into, because of this movement, this philosophical movement, Cassadaga Camp was developed. Lilydale was developed, plus dozens of other camps, spiritualist camps, were developed because of this wrappings from the 1848s, in my opinion. Any other questions? No questions, Corey? Gotta have questions. Yes, ma'am.
So the Fox sisters certainly weren't the first mediums to contact spirit.
Absolutely not.
So what do you think made them so different than others?
I would say because a lot of people started organizing home circles, organizing demonstrations more because of the Fox sisters. So they were like the catalyst, so to say, where their demonstrations brought more people in to the fold, and then it started to grow. And when you grow, you start getting on people's radars, religious radars, ministers' radars. And what I'll go into next week is the detriments that became of now we're famous, now what? So the Fox sisters, even though they had a celebrity start, their lives ended not well, like most celebrities nowadays. You rise up, then you rise down. So, yes, ma'am.
Do you think it could possibly be the fact that they were celebrated is the fact that they were a large family? And I think if you started something with a group of people, number one, they support each other. But number two, they draw in more people. Well, instead of just being like the only child, the only one doing this, it might be harder to gather support.
Mm-hmm.
But if you already have a family of some size, like three
No,
people that starts, that all spreads out.
You're absolutely right. It's not like one individual trying
It would
to.
be harder to start, I would
You've
think.
got your core family, the Fox family, already in place.
Right.
Then you start bringing in close friends like the Posts,
Right.
the publisher, bringing them in, and start your circles start getting bigger and wider with people you trust.
Well, and then also the Posts were involved with abolitionism and women's rights, which
Mhm.
means they thought outside of the box. So there's another
Absolutely.
area of not mainstream trying to, like you said, sell papers.
Correct, and they were also they're Quakers, so their branch split off because they were free thinkers.
That's right. Yeah, they didn't fit the mold. I'm
They didn't
sure.
fit the mold.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, we're going to end class today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
It feels like you traveled too far, finding your way with only the light of stars. Constellations point toward your sacred kin, helping each other to find our unique medicine. And your eyes shining brighter, your heart feeling lighter, and your ego getting smaller, like the loosening of a collar, and your purpose getting clearer. Spirit family drawing nearer. I know a man who's always expecting a prize, and I know a man who thanks the sun when it's on the rise. I know a woman who keeps her dreams locked in a tin, and I know a woman who dances in four directions. And your eyes shining brighter, your heart feeling lighter, and your ego getting smaller, like the loosening of a collar, and your purpose getting clearer, spirit family drawing nearer. I know a mountain that gets taller the higher you climb, and I know a poem that gets longer the more than you rhyme. I know a dream that gets bigger the more you believe, and I know a bridge that gets stronger the more than you breathe. And your eyes shining brighter, your heart feeling lighter, and your ego getting smaller, like the loosening of a collar, and your purpose getting clearer, spirit family drawing nearer. Went to the water and there's a lot of days and a lot of ways to see. Went to the fire, there's a lot of days and a lot of ways to see. Look to the ground, there's a lot of days and a lot of ways to see. Look to the sky and there's a lot of days and a lot of ways to see. I know sometimes it feels like you travel too far, finding your way with only the light of stars. Constellations point toward